What's up everybody, this is the 2024 Subaru Impreza. So for the all-new generation of the Impreza here, it's made a lot of big changes, but also some things have stayed pretty much the same. So obviously the styling is radically changed, and also the body styles offered is radically changed. So there's no more sedan in the Impreza lineup. They said 73% of buyers went for the hatchback, and it cuts costs for them, of course, because this is shared with the same platform as the Subaru Crosstrek, shares much with the Crosstrek aside from the lower ride height and all that here in this. But anyway, as far as other dimensions go here, ground clearance is the same as the last generation Impreza, and all the wheelbase, the length, and the width, that has all stayed the same as well. The only thing that has changed is the height, which is a tiny bit higher than before, but otherwise, you know, it just looks really great. I love these sleek new headlights up front here, the bold grille. And this one we're looking at here is the RS trim, and so it's a new trim here that's offered for the Impreza. Gives you the stronger 2.5 liter engine with 182 horsepower for those who want a little more power in their Impreza but don't want to go all the way up to a WRX. This is kind of supposed to be an in-between for those people, and so it also gives you the darker accents here, these 18-inch wheels and the badging, and you know, just a little bit of a sportier look here for this one. But in the back there you have some new taillights and you know, just the traditional hatch you're used to here in these Imprezas, and so I'm really glad they didn't make it too big or try and change it too much. They kept it, you know, simple and stuck to the original formula here for the Imprezas. It's a nice small little hatchback, and I think it looks pretty good here for this new generation. The interior of the 2024 Impreza is really nice as long as you like big touchscreens. So that's the big change here for the 2024 Impreza, is everything except the base trim gets this 11.6-inch touchscreen, and I'll get more to that in a minute. But beyond that, otherwise though, on the RS here you have these red accents, and these seats, by the way, are redesigned and they're a little more comfy and supportive than before, and I really like them. The week I've been driving this vehicle so far, they're really nice and comfortable. They're also heated here in the RS version as well. The steering wheel here in the Impreza though is pretty nice. It's leather wrapped here in these higher trims as well, and it even has the paddle shifters here on the back, and it has a great 9-3 grip and a good wheel overall. The only thing I will say is that there's a few too many buttons here on it. Like, Subaru does not need to have a button to change sources on the steering wheel, or a button for the drive mode selector in an Impreza. Like, you can put that somewhere else. So I think the steering wheel has a little more clutter than I would like, but still, you know, a good wheel overall. The gauges are also simple, sticking with the usual thing Subaru does with the analog gauges, the little digital portion in the middle there that's pretty small, has very little customization, but does the basics just fine. But with all the other competitors these days, there's a lot more impressive stuff out there, and so, you know, I'd say this is average at best, you know, these days, but still gets the job done just fine. But getting back to this big 11.6-inch touchscreen, so if you go for a base trim, you do get rid of this screen, but you still, in place of it, have two 7-inch displays instead. One that'll do your radio and infotainment stuff, and then the other one on the bottom will do your climate controls. So no matter how you cut it, you're going to have big screens here in the Impreza, unfortunately, and there's no way around that if you want the new Impreza. But as far as the screen goes, thankfully, it's not bad. It's not one of the best out there, and it's still a little laggy. Sometimes when you first start it up in the morning, it's going to be a little slow to react for the first few seconds, and then it will, you know, do what you want it to do. But it's just a little bit annoying because sometimes, you know, if you want to hurry up and crank up the heat, or, you know, crank on the air conditioning, and you don't have it in an auto setting, you know, it's going to take it a few seconds in order to register those commands. But otherwise, it's really easy to use the radio and all that. It also does have wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto here for the 2024, so that's really great too. You never have to plug your phone in. Now, if you're on a long trip, you're still going to probably want to plug your phone in, but at least for the short trips, it's really great to have that without having to fumble with a cable. You also still have volume and tune knobs, and again, a few physical controls here for your climate to change things simply still. And also here in the Impreza, you have physical heated seat controls. In other Subarus, that's incorporated into the screen as well, which can be a little bit annoying. If you hop into the vehicle and you're cold, you want to turn that on. In like the Outback and stuff, it takes a few seconds in order to do that. And also here in the RS, there's a package that's about $2,000 that gives you a power driver's seat, a sunroof, and also this 10-speaker Harman Kardon stereo. And this stereo, I was actually really impressed with. Subaru stereos in general typically aren't like really impressive to me, but this one, for this segment, was actually really good sounding. And now it's not quite as good as the Bose systems that the Civic and the Mazda3 offer, but beyond those, I think this is one of the better ones out there, and I was really impressed with the way it sounded over this week. And so if you do really like music, it might be worth spending the extra $2,000 if that and the sunroof are worth it to you. But other things though, storage spaces are really good here in the Impreza. They're always very practical, of course. You have nice large bottle pockets in the doors. You also have a wireless charging pad here in the RS. Also two cup holders, a power outlet, and the center armrest, which is just nice and softly padded and has a good deep cubby in there as well. The back seat in the Impreza is also pretty nice and spacious. Now, don't expect much more space than the previous generation, again, since it hasn't gotten any longer or anything. But, you know, since you have the extra height, you might have a little bit more rear headroom there. And so me being 5'9", sitting behind myself, I still have several inches of legroom to spare, though. The Imprezas were always really spacious for the size of the vehicle they are here. And so I have no complaints as far as space goes. You also here in the higher trims have a fold-down center armrest with cup holders built into it, and also USB jacks here. Again, but that's only on the higher trims. The base trim does not have those two things, but you do still have the pockets in the doors there. And as far as the hatch goes here in the Impreza, it's really nice and square, so you can really fit a lot of stuff in there. It's nice. You also even have little cup holders there in the back. If you want to just hang out in the hatch, you can do that. And beneath the floor there, you will see there is a spare tire, so it's great that they still include that along with the jack and a few little tiny cubbies there as well. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Impreza here just has Subaru's usual key. It's a nice key though, has some little bit of metal here on the sides and just a nice key. So of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here. In these top two trims, the base trim still does have a normal twist key, but the other trims here you got the keyless start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the Impreza RS. So the first thing you notice here is that you have excellent visibility. I mean, you also can't really get the seat too low, so this is as low as it goes. And me being 5'9", I mean, I still feel like I have headroom, but you know, you still feel like you're sitting up a little high because the dash is just really low, the hood's really low, and so even if you're, you know, on the shorter side and you have your seat all the way down, you still have a really good view forward, great view out of the sides, nice thin A-pillar here, mirrors off onto the doors, great view out of the back, super easy to drive. This would be a really great little city car and stuff just because visibility is so good. Other things though, so they have really good throttle response here in these Imprezas. It's naturally aspirated engine, and the CVT is also really responsive. Now, I don't love Subaru's CVT. It's not my favorite. I think Honda and Nissan both do more natural feeling CVTs these days, but what I will say is that the way they tuned the throttle response, I mean, you never are waiting around for a response. Every time you just barely touch the gas, it immediately springs forward and gives you the response you're looking for, maybe even a little more response than you're looking for. But I'd rather have that than some kind of delay or disconnect. So I just think it's really well done. Also, the brakes are really nice and natural feeling. They said there's a new brake booster. It's an electronic brake booster now, but to me, it feels just the same as any other Subaru brakes in the past. Very consistent, very predictable, and just very easy to be smooth with. I really love the way Subaru sets their brakes up. And other things here though, you also have a new steering rack. The steering rack is very similar to the one in the new WRX as well. And so they say it's better steering feel. It allows it to be a little lighter. And I think for this type of a vehicle, it's got just enough weight to it to feel substantial and like it's connected to something, but it's not super heavy or anything. It just feels really nice. Some other nice improvements here for the 2024 Impreza are that you have more sound deadening now, so it's quieter in here whenever you're out on the road. And also they've also improved the stiffness of this platform. So the Subaru Global platform, this is on a new generation of that, and it's been enhanced, so it's 10% stiffer than before. So the stiffness means that the whole vehicle just feels more solid. Not that the ride is stiff, it's still a nice, soft, comfortable ride, even on these 18-inch wheels. It still feels totally fine, and really a nice vehicle to drive around in for sure. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode for the SI drive, and that quickens up your throttle response and all that. Unfortunately though, it doesn't turn off the auto stop start, which this vehicle still insists on doing. But anyway, let's turn on to this back road here and see how it does. So see, it just mostly wants to sit at red light. I mean, it did a little bit of a shift there, but it just feels kind of unnatural still. But anyway, whenever you're flooring this thing, it does about a 7.5 seconds 0 to 60 roughly, thanks to the 2.5 liter Boxer 4 that this now runs in the RS version here. And so this version will give you 182 horsepower and 178 pound-feet of torque, which is about 30 more horsepower and about 33 more pound-feet of torque than the base setup you get in the base trim and in the sport trims. And so it's appreciated. It's more power. That is nice. But anyone who wants more power, I would argue, especially if you're going for this RS trim, which this one has tested, is $31,000 with that $2,000 package for the sunroof and the stereo. At $31,000, you can get a WRX for $31,000. Honestly, it'd be a base one, but you can get one, and it's not far off from this. So if you're really caring about performance, I'd just go up and get a WRX and be done with it. But if you are someone who just wants a little more power, you still really want the hatch thing, which the WRX doesn't offer, unfortunately, I could see a small niche where this upgraded engine makes sense, but otherwise I think for the average person, you're better off sticking to the Sport, or for, sticking to the base trim even, for that matter, and you get slightly better fuel economy. And the power, yeah, I mean, you'll have a little bit less power. It'll be like about a 9 seconds 0 to 60 in those, but it still should be fine. So, it's just going to come down to, what you're looking for personally. It's cool they've brought the RS back, but to me, it could have used a little more power if they wanted to really impress you. I mean, because you're still down almost 100 horsepower from the WRX. So, it's nice, but, it's, I don't know, I'm kind of lackluster about the whole RS thing. But anyway, other things, so we're on this road that generates some more road noise, a little bit of a rougher road here. And, I'd say it's still pretty quiet, for this segment of vehicle. It's not the quietest. I'd say the Mazda 3 probably takes that crown, but it's not bad. I think it's pretty good. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here. Is another Impreza Hatch, by the way. But coming up some corners here, let's see how the Impreza handles. So we're just on all-season tires, but again, the 18s here will certainly help us a little bit. Then you do have standard torque vectoring now in all versions of the Impreza. Previously, I think the top trim used to have it, but now it's on all of them. And the handling is actually really good. So the Boxer engine, of course, helps you with the lower center of gravity. That's what Subaru's kind of famous for. But just in general, this whole platform just feels really good. And you can feel the torque vectoring working a little bit. It's a brake-based torque vectoring system, so it's not true torque vectoring, but most of the systems out there these days from other competitors are also brake-based and does a really good job. This thing just feels really agile and feels really good. I still don't think it's the best out there either. Still kind of mid-pack. You're sensing a theme here possibly with the Impreza, but mid-pack as far as handling goes, I'd say Civic certainly feels a little bit better. I think Corolla actually feels a little bit more exciting in the corners as well. This definitely is favoring understeer a little bit more, and so I find myself, when I'm turning in, it's not quite as eager as those competitors are, I'd say. But it still is, a nice small light vehicle. These weigh just over 3,300 pounds, even with the fully loaded version here. And, it's really good handling, so I don't think anyone's going to really complain. I think it's a really, fun little car to toss around. I've had a really great week just daily driving this thing, running errands, the small size, the good handling, the good ride. It's just a very pleasant thing. And the extra power certainly means you're not, waiting as long for, merging onto highways and things like that. You have a little bit better performance there too, which is always appreciated. The all-wheel drive traction is great, and this is also the cheapest all-wheel drive vehicle in America you can get as far as new vehicles go. So, I mean, very impressive. They're able to keep the price tag, nice and low. These start at about $24,000, but it's just a really nice thing to cruise around in. And I think for the average person, regardless of whether you go for this RS trim or any version of this new Impreza, it's just, you're going to appreciate the extra refinement, the extra quietness, and just the way that this whole vehicle drives is really nice. Then they did also say that for this engine, by the way, they did improve the mid-range torque a little bit. So it's not a complete copy and paste job from, like the Crosstrek with the 2.5. It does have a little bit more power. The CVT ratios are also a little different here whenever you go for this RS version. But unfortunately, it'd be cool to see the manual. That'd be one other way to differentiate this, is to offer a manual transmission. Unfortunately, there is no manual in any Impreza anymore. They used to offer it in the base trim, but they just quit doing that because they said very few people were going for it. Wasn't worth continuing to offer it. So no more manual here. Another way, you got to go up to the WRX if you want the manual now. And now I'm out on the highway here, and I have the adaptive cruise control system on, which is standard, by the way. You have adaptive cruise control standard with the lane centering and lane keep assist is standard, along with automatic emergency braking is standard as well. We have a gentle corner here. I'm just kind of hovering my hands on the wheel. This is a hands-on system still, of course, but just trying to test out, how this actually, handles the corners here. And it's doing a pretty good job here so far. I didn't have a ton of time this week to test out how the system works, but in past experiences with Subaru's eyesight system, it's been really good. It's been really good about staying in the lanes, doing intelligent centering, not ping-ponging too much or anything. I've been pretty happy with it, so I think this is definitely one of the better systems out there these days. And one thing I also really appreciate is that this system beeps a little less. So they did improve the eyesight system. There's a wider view camera now, so it's supposed to be able to see more, pick up more stuff, but they also retuned it so that it doesn't constantly beep at you. The previous generation and all the other current Subarus, this system loves to beep at you constantly if a car pulls in front of you, or anything that happens, it has to beep you for some reason, and so it's just really annoying. This doesn't have as many beeps. There was one beep where it was a little overkill on the lane departure alert and gave me a beep one time for that, but aside from that, it's been pretty quiet all week, which I appreciate. But yeah, another gentle corner there, and it also did a really good job. It's just a really natural feeling system. It doesn't really give me any doubts with the way that it does the steering assist. assist. And so on long drives, it'll really give you some nice, relaxation. Again, you still have to pay attention, still have to be doing the steering and making sure that, you're hitting the lanes and all that. But it just makes those micro corrections for you and just really helps to, take some of the extra, stress off of the drive. And so, yeah, I think it's a really nice highway cruiser. So smooth still, too. I do have to really commend it on the smoothness. I have to say that maybe, aside from the Mazda 3, this is probably the smoothest ride in this segment. One last little important thing to note about safety stuff, though, is that one thing that is not standard is blind spot monitoring. It's an option on the Sport trim, and it does come on the RS trims here, but on a base trim, you can't even get blind spot monitoring, which is kind of crazy. So that's the only way that this is still deficient as far as safety goes, because there are some other competitors that do give you blind spot monitoring as standard these days. But I guess that was one of the concessions they had to make, I guess, to keep the price tag at the cheapest all-wheel drive vehicle in America. This doesn't have that. But aside from that, all the other safety tech here is really good, and, it gives you all the usual stuff you're expecting. But the last two things I mentioned here are the fuel economy and the pricing and how this compares to the competition. So as far as fuel economy goes, these are rated at 27 mpg in the city, 34 on the highway, and 30 combined for the regular base engine. And then if you go up to the RS trim here, you will sacrifice 1 mpg in each of those metrics. But honestly, 1 mpg isn't a bad compromise for an extra half-liter displacement and an extra 30 horsepower. And during my week of driving here, I got 25.4 mpg, which is not bad, but honestly, I was hoping for a little bit more, considering, again, 27 is the city rating, and I did a pretty good mix of 50-50 of highway and city, I would say. So I was expecting, to get a little bit more there, but 25 mpg in an all-wheel drive thing, I guess, isn't too bad. But the one thing that is a bummer, though, is that even if you go for that base engine, though, it's just carryover from the previous generation, but for some reason, it gets 1 less in the city and 2 less on the highway than the old car did. So not sure if the aerodynamics just got worse or what happened there that you're getting worse fuel economy than the previous generation, but that's the reality, and so just keep that in mind. One thing that also changed is the fuel tank. It used to be like a 13.5 gallon fuel tank. It's now gone up to 16.6 gallons for the fuel tank. So fill-ups will cost you a good bit more now, but you'll have more range. You can get almost 500 miles out of a tank here in the Imprezas now. So, it just comes down to your preferences there as far as those two metrics. But, I think it's a nice change as well. Now, as far as pricing goes, it's very well done for the base version. If you're okay with not having all the features and stuff, 24 grand, cheapest thing in America with all-wheel drive. I think it's really impressive, and the fact that you still have the good technology that it still has with the double 7-inch screens in that base trim, still all the same basic stuff, just the great packaging. I think it's a really solid buy if you're going for one of those base trims. I think when you go up to these higher trims, though, that's where the value proposition really starts to fall apart. And like this one has tested, this RS with this $2 grand option package, $31,000. $31,000, at that point, I don't know who this is for, because if you are someone, I guess it's for someone who must have all-wheel drive above all else, and you're willing to compromise on other stuff, because otherwise, $30,000 can get you a Civic Si, which is way more fun. It has the manual transmission, those types of things. And like I said, you can even get a WRX for 30 grand. A comparable WRX is going to run you about 36 if you want the moonroof and a nicer stereo in those. But if you can compromise on those two things, you can get yourself into a WRX, which is way more fun. Like I said, almost 100 extra horsepower for the same, $31,000 here. So, that's why I don't really buy the whole sporty pitch of the RS here, because I just think that anyone that's actually into sporty stuff is going to go for, those competitors. And now, if you are someone who must have the hatchback thing, and, you want just something small, I will say that you can also get yourself a Mazda3 Hatch. The Mazda 3, you can get that with all-wheel drive as well, and that gives you a real 6-speed automatic that feels better than this CVT, and that also feels a little punchier with the horsepower. You get a few more horsepower and a few more pound-feet of torque in that, and it's also quieter inside. It's much more luxurious inside, and actually it's only, I think, a few $100s more expensive comparable to this and that for that top all-wheel drive version without the turbo. If you don't need the all-wheel drive, you can also get those Mazda 3 hatches with a manual still, so definitely something to keep in mind there for the manual lovers. But You know, so I think if it were my money and I still needed an all-wheel drive hatch and I didn't have to have the most horsepower possible, I would just go Mazda3 Hatch with the all-wheel drive. If you are okay with front-wheel drive, there's also the Honda Civic hatchback, which is great. I really love those. They're a little more fun to drive. They have a nice turbocharged engine, gives you a little bit more punch than this naturally aspirated engine does with those higher versions of the Civic, the EXL and the Sport Touring, which kind of undercut this for the EXL and then kind of are a little bit more expensive than this for that Sport Touring. But those, you know, are something to consider as well. And again, just have nicer interiors than this does. And just in my opinion, you know, would be another one I would probably take over this Impreza here. And the one last wild card competitor that I'll throw out there as well is the Prius. The new Prius with all-wheel drive. Those start, you know, right around $30,000 as well, or a little bit under $30,000. And you can get an XLE that has some more features than this does, even for about $33,000. You have, you know, so for like $2 or $3 grand more, you're gonna have more power. Those have about 14 more horsepower. You get 50 miles per gallon in those Priuses, 50 mpg in an all-wheel drive Prius. They look great. You have the lift back practicality, not quite as versatile as this, with this having this boxier shape, but you know, if you don't need the most practicality, 100%, I think Prius is great. You're gonna save so much money on gas. They look awesome, more power, and I think the handling's a little more fun as well in the Prius, in my opinion. So just another one to throw out there. Again, that, you know, you get some really cool stuff for 30 grand these days, and so that's where this RS kind of falls apart. But if you are someone who, you know, happens to fit the niche of wanting a little more power, liking the sportier nature, wanting the hatch and the all-wheel drive, and really just wanting a Subaru, that's another thing that really holds a lot of value for some people. If you really want that Subaru branding, you know, I can see this will make sense for some people. Overall, still a nice vehicle. I like it in a vacuum. I think it's great. It's been a fun thing to run around in all week. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2024 Impreza. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Subaru for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Please also leave a like, comment, and subscribe to keep these videos coming. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.